and welcome to my August reading review. Today I'm going to talk to you about all of the books I read in August. I read 4 books, which is a big improvement on from July. Mostly fantasy, but there is a reason. So for the month of August, I actually let my boyfriend choose all of the books I read. I have another video in the works that brought you along with the whole experience as I was reading these kind of weird books or books that I wouldn't choose for myself. So look forward to that. Let's get into the reviews. The first book I read in August was Red Rising by Pierce Brown. This is a YA sci-fi and I gave it 4.75 stars. So this is actually the first book in this series. And I heard that basically the author wasn't sure whether he wanted to go into YA or adult sci-fi, fantasy, that kind of genre. And that kind of does come through in the book. So while this book is technically YA, apparently his later books go more adult. And again, it really did come through that maybe the author was more interested in adult themes rather than YA. I actually quite enjoyed this, and I was actually quite surprised by that because I don't like sci-fi like media at all. Star Wars isn't my thing. Anything set in space, no interest to me. And so when I saw or found out that the first book I was going to read was sci-fi, I was like, you're killing me here. But I was happily surprised. And the thing about it is it had all of the elements of fantasy that I enjoy. So I think it kind of took the bits I like and just put it into more of a like dystopia, the future, Earth is dead and / dying kind of setting, rather than like just straight up being in the middle of space, even though it is set in space and stuff. So as I said, the book is set in the future where there's like this color-coded society, right? And the main character, Darrow, is a red, and the reds are literally in the mines. They are kind of at the lowest level of this society that there is. Golds are the like ruling class, I suppose, or like the top of the pyramid. Reds are on the bottom, and there's a whole lot of other colors, and each color has like their thing. I think, is it the blues that are law enforcement? There's a lot of colors going on. I don't quite remember what everyone did. If I was reading it again or reading the next book, it'd come back to me quicker. But yeah, that's the kind of they're almost like factions. So that's where I was like, that's very fantasy concept. Like every fantasy concept has done that. So it was more appealing to me. And the physical characteristics of the characters match their color. So for example, the reds are all like ginger and the golds are like blonde with gold eyes or something. So it's very obvious who you are, is basically the thing. Without spoiling too much or anything, Darrow's world really gets like flipped upside down and twisted, and he ends up basically in a situation where he's fighting for survival against a lot of other people in a kind of arena setting. Not quite an arena, but almost like an arena setting, where there are people who can see them and watch them as they fight it out. And think Hunger Games meets Capture the Flag kind of experience. So like the first little bit is with Darrow and stuff going on with reds and stuff, and then a lot of it is taken up by this arena Hunger Games style. And I actually was asking my boyfriend, I was like, when the arena stuff started, I was like, how long does this actually go on for? And he was like, that's the rest of the book. You're like, get comfy, you're here for a while. So most of the book is actually survival, capture the flag, Hunger Games, arena games kind of thing. The book can actually be very gruesome in a way that actually kind of shocked me. Like, oh, okay, so we're doing this, we're going there, right? And for that reason, here are many user-reported trigger warnings. There's a lot. There's so much, and it can be uncomfortable sometimes, and even the detail can be very uncomfortable sometimes. The treatment of women and how women were like commented on did rub me the wrong way sometimes, so be wary of that. But the story was still pretty solid. There was just a few like eye-rolly moments where I was like, oh, of course a sci-fi book would have a comment like that. But at the end of the day, I was actually very surprised by how much I did like this. And it does kind of feel like Hunger Games fans grew up and have graduated to this. That's again, the vibe I'm getting. And I will read the rest of the series. Like, I enjoyed it. And so I'm curious where it goes from here, what's going on, revelations about characters, you learn stuff. And so, yeah, I actually do quite recommend it. But as I said, check that trigger warning list because there's a lot of them. The next book I read was Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. So this is a little bit of a shorter book and it's kind of this weird fantasy standalone, and I actually gave it 4 out of 5 stars. This is another book I probably would have never picked up. And again, it was a real surprise for me. So obviously I give it 4 out of 5. So I actually did quite enjoy it. This is listed as a fantasy online, but I would almost call it a mystery with fantasy elements, because most of the time you're like, what the hell is going on? And of course there are like inklings of magic or like a magic fantastical element throughout, but really you're like, what the hell is going on? Where am I? Who is this? What? So I do think it's more mystery because you're finding stuff out. It is incredibly atmospheric, and I do actually recommend that you go in with very little knowledge of what's going on. So here, don't worry about spoilers because that's not, I won't spoil or give you much information on what's going on or even context, just because I do think it is, that unknown stuff is really what made it intriguing. The time period is hard to discern at first, but again, that really adds to the experience of this book. And so, like, a tiny bit of background without giving you really any context. This book follows Piranesi as he wanders through essentially this labyrinth of halls and vestibules. The halls are all named in a way that is super hard to follow and kind of place in your head unless you have this amazing imagination that I do not have. And that adds to it because you're like, what are you talking about? Where are you going? Oh, you mean the room that has that statue? Okay, now I know where you're going. But the names just are so hard to track. And at first I was trying to, but then, you know, I think the third hall name came up and I was like, you know what? Let's go with the flow. I don't need to know exactly, you know, if he was turning left or right at that junction. We're good. So if you really need to imagine the setting to enjoy a book, not the book for you, because the whole time you're going to be a bit lost, or the general vibe of the room, hall, vestibule is there, but you won't actually be able to follow the path very well, in my opinion. So keep that in mind. And then as the book goes along, you kind of get this sense that there is something off, or like something going on, and you start to uncover what the hell is going on in this universe, in this story. Like, how and why is Piranesi in this labyrinth? Is Piranesi his real name? Who is he? These are all questions you will probably have as you go through the book. And again, you get snippets, you get bits and pieces as you figure out what's going on. The start of the book is a little slow, and so it does take a bit of time, and you have to put in the time to get to the bottom of it and get your answers. They're not just served up to you, so you really do have to earn your answers by sticking with it. I don't actually think I've read anything like this before. It was completely new to me. Even just like the experience of reading this was completely new to me. So I can't even think of anything to compare it to recommend it or not recommend it, depending on what you like. I'm trying to actually think of what kind of reader would enjoy this. Probably people who enjoy an unreliable narrator will enjoy this, and maybe people who don't mind that slow start. But yeah, I just enjoyed it, and it actually has a Women's Prize for Fiction from 2021, so we love to see it. But yeah, I totally recommend Piranesi, but I also acknowledge that it may not be for everyone. The third book I read in August was Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. This is a thriller, and I gave it 4.75 out of 5. So this was actually the book I pulled out of my TBR jar last month, and I was a bit nervous going into it. First of all, it is actually pretty big. It is nearly 500 pages, and I don't really know if that's standard for a thriller or not. I'm just, fantasy books are definitely that long, romance books shouldn't be that long, so I don't actually have a frame of reference for thrillers. On that point, I am not an experienced thriller reader, so this may or may not be the best review if you are an experienced thriller reader, because I don't have much context to compare this to. So while I think it was very good and I enjoyed it, if you're more experienced in the genre, you may not have liked it as much. In case you don't know what Gone Girl is about, basically a girl goes missing, or a woman goes missing on her 5th wedding anniversary. All signs point to her husband, and that's on the blurb, that's not a spoiler. Loads of signs point to her husband. He insists he didn't do it, obviously. And so it's all about finding out, did he do it? Did he not do it? What's going on? Is there a deeper plot? Is there not? And there is also, she has this diary that is actually pretty incriminating. So all throughout it, you're kind of swapping between Nick, who is the husband, and Amy's diary. Amy being the woman gone missing, and you're kind of seeing who to believe, what to believe, and the police are investigating, and all the while you don't actually know what happened to Amy, so you're kind of trying to figure out along with the police what's going on. Plot ensues from there. This is obviously a very famous thriller and a just as famous movie. I have already seen the movie. I saw the movie before I read the book. That was actually what made me want to read the book, was that I enjoyed the movie so much. It did not differ. Like the movie was a great adaptation, I think. But because of that, the big twists and turns weren't quite big twists and turns, because I knew exactly what happened. I'm sure the first time I saw the movie, I was like, whoa. Yeah, okay, cool. I'm sure that would have enhanced the read. However, I still enjoyed seeing the inside of the brains of the characters as I was reading, because I feel like it actually did give more depth to both the characters, finding out the more minute details of what was going on in their heads. I have seen some mixed reviews online. Like, it is overwhelmingly positive, but then the negative ones are sticking out, and I just had a little read to see what people were saying. Most of the people I've seen who disliked the book was because they found the characters unlikable, which I just find a bit funny to say about a thriller, because from my very limited knowledge of thrillers, I assumed that the characters are supposed to be unlikable, because that's how you explore them. They're not supposed to be fun and relatable people you want to hang out with. They're supposed to be bad people with bad flaws, like really bad flaws, if it's a thriller. And so I didn't really see that side of the criticism, but of course, if that's not your thing, yeah, these people are not likable. These are not good people. So if you don't like that, you're not gonna like this book. So, but I like a deeply flawed person, especially these kind of flaws, because it's interesting to get inside the head of someone you are not like. So obviously, I'm not like these characters. I hope you know that. And so I like, to see what's going on inside these heads. So And it's actually very interesting to me. But of course, it's not for everyone. Just to mention as well, because it is a thriller, check your trigger warnings as always. And especially with a thriller, because thrillers are always going to be a bit out there with the themes and, you know, the bad stuff. So yeah, do double check that before you pick it up, basically. All in all, I did quite enjoy this. I don't see myself running out to read any more of Flynn's books. Not anytime soon, and definitely not like with all of the books on my cart and everything. So I don't have an overwhelming urge to read more thrillers. But yeah, so that was Gone Girl. Last and certainly least, I read This Census Taker by China Miéville. This is kind of like a weird fantasy novella. It's very short. And I gave it 2 stars. This book was harder to read than all 3 of the others combined. It was sometimes painful to actually push through. There's only, I think 140 pages, and yet 100 of those pages just felt so boring and so slow. It actually started to pick up around the last 20 pages or so, but then it just ended. And so I think, ironically, this book would have benefited from being a full-length book rather than just the little novella. And that's because with a fantasy book, you always have like the first like 100 pages of learning the world and kind of getting to know what's going on, where you are, the magic, the politics, everything. And you kind of know that going into a new fantasy book. But then it usually picks up from there. Whereas this book just ended. It never got the chance to get deeper and more interesting because it just finishes. And so plain and simple, I just did not like this book. The plot follows a little boy who lives up kind of in the hillside, just slightly away from a little town. And one day he witnesses something, an event, and that sends him running down to the little town. He is confused about what he saw, and his mum is now missing. He believes something happened, but his father is saying that the mother just left. The rest of the book is basically just him running away and then coming home and running away and coming home. So it's a lot of that. And then the census taker ends up coming into it with maybe 20 pages left. And then like that gets a bit interesting, but it's still a bit too late to throw in another plot point of what's going on. And then something else that actually really bothered me was that the book kept changing point of view. So sometimes it would say, I did this, I said this, my house, my father, my mother, blah, blah, blah. Our house was at the blah, blah, blah. And then other times it would be like, when he met the man who became his line manager, the boy. Like, it swaps from I to the boy. And I'm like, okay, why? I don't mind either point of view. I don't really mind any point of views, but stick to it. I want one point of view. Style. Like, yeah, that just seemed unnecessary to me to be swapping. I'm sure maybe it means something in literature analysis, but it didn't stick with me or hit right, I suppose. One thing that was interesting enough was this kind of in the background magic system about keys that can do magic. But they they have some kind of magic, but again, they weren't actually explored that much. It was just kind of like oh yeah, his father did key stuff and could do this, and people came to his father to make keys, to do stuff. But other than that, was it like explored? We didn't actually see a key in action. Surely that could be a book. Surely there's something, that a universe almost that could have been made from that? No, apparently not. All in all, this is probably not the best China Miéville book to start with. And I won't be rushing back to another China Miéville book. he himself says he writes weird fiction. And yeah, weird fiction right here. Really weird. So I don't know. I don't know if he has gained a fan in me. Not so far anyway. Okay, and so that was all of the books, all of the reviews. Now I'm going to pick a book from my TBR jar. Twisted Lies. That's actually funny because I was thinking of putting this on my list for this month anyway. So here we go. That is a thick romance book. But yeah, it looks like by the end of this month, 559? Yeah, okay, anyway. That's a long romance book. There we go. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, here's another one that YouTube recommends for you. I will see you next time.